Welcome all to the meeting of the Standards of the Democratic Services Committee. Thank you very much. My name is Karen Bowen. I'm the Democratic Services Officer supporting the meeting today for the benefit of those viewing online. To let you know that the first item of business is to prepare some housekeeping notes for you, which basically is that all members of the council who wish to speak in the meeting are requested to come to be seen and heard under the Local Government and Elections Act guidance and regulations. They must be seen and heard. If members have any problems during the meeting with their mic or their camera, could they please let Democratic Services know as soon as possible, and we can make the necessary arrangements to resolve those issues. The chat is limited use during the meeting. We would request that all members speak during the meeting online, on camera and through their mics, so that the public viewing can actually hear what's being said, as they cannot always see the comments that are made in the chat. I would like to now move on to the first item with the Chair's permission. Chair, if I can hand over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Penawdau'r croeswyr cyfarfod Pwyllgor Gwasanaethau Democrataidd Cyngor Bro Morgannwg. Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Vale of Morven Democratic Services Committee. There are two main items that we'll be discussing today, two substantive items. Those are the revised multi-location meetings policy and from charter to self-assessment, the evolution of the Wales Charter for member support and development. Under part one, our first item is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence, Karen?
I don't have any apologies for absence myself, Chair, but
Councillor Carroll also indicating to speak.
Yeah.
Councillor Steve Haynes.
Steve Haynes, thank you very much.
Thank
Any
you.
further apologies being offered today?
I don't,
Councillor
Chair,
Perks?
but sorry.
It could be Neil Thomas. I think he's in another meeting and hoping to come into this one if he can. If I can just give his apologies in case. Okay.
Thanks very much, Sandra.
Thank you
Any
very
other
much.
apologies? I think there's only, that's almost everybody. But, hopefully anybody who hasn't arrived already will arrive soon. Item 2 is the minutes of the previous meeting, which is the meeting held on 11th of April 2023. What we agreed in that meeting was that there would also be a copy included of the survey as originally sent to members in January 2023, and that's been included at the foot of the second page for those of you who have a printed copy, and sort of on as part of the item on member induction development programme update and outcome of the learning needs survey. So noting that that has been included, are members happy for us to accept those minutes as an accurate record of the meeting? Can I have a hand to move that, please?
Happy to recommend them that they be accepted.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hanks and Councillor Perks. I've got a hand up from you. Seconded. Excellent. Thank you very much. In that case, we move on to item 3, which is to receive declarations of interest and the nature of such interests under the Council's Code of Conduct. Do we have any relevant declarations for today's meeting? No hands raised, therefore I assume that's no. We now move on to the report to the Head of Democratic Services, and item 4 is the revised multi-location meetings policy, which I believe is being taken by Karen Bowen today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will take the report on behalf of the Head of Democratic Services, but as I mentioned to you prior to the meeting, Debbie Miles, the Monitoring Officer, Head of Legal Services, and Nick Wheeler is also present. Nick Wheeler being the Operational Manager for ICT. They're both present in the meeting here today, should there be any further questions that you require of their service areas. Can I also, first, before I start presenting the report, mention that this meeting is being recorded and is being live streamed on the internet for those wishing to view, and it will be recorded and then archived for future viewing purposes. Sorry, Chair, I was remiss in mentioning that earlier. If I could commence then with presenting the report, and in the first instance, I can see, Chair, as well, that Councillor Prothero has arrived. In the first instance, if I can just commence by looking at the executive summary of the report, and if I could just give an overview of where we're at today. And basically, the Cabinet received a report at its meeting on the 20th of December 21, which provided a progress update on the legislative requirements of the Local Government and Elections Act 21 and on a hybrid solution for use at council meetings. The Council agreed on the 1st of May 2021 to publish its attendance at local authority meetings guidance, and agreed at that same time, in light of COVID-19, that all meetings would be live streamed going forward. In April 2022, in compliance with the Local Government Elections Act, a revised attendance at local authority meetings policy was prepared and drafted and agreed by Cabinet and full council that year. And it was also agreed by Cabinet that a review would be undertaken of the policy upon receipt of any further statutory guidance, because as members may appreciate, back in 21 we also had interim guidance and the policies were prepared based on those documents. We have now received in June this year, June 23, 15th of June to be precise, the Welsh Government published statutory and non-statutory guidance now for principal councils in relation to a number of areas, and in particular for the discussions today around the MLM policy, and which I'm bringing forward to you today for members' consideration. And a revised policy is attached to Appendix A to this report, and members will be able to see that I have highlighted in that document where we consider the relevant amendments for clarification need to be made, or additions and deletions need to be made. One deletion being in relation to COVID-19 now. We don't consider that to be relevant in this document at this moment in time. So if I can go on to then the key issues for consideration today, and I can refer to paragraph 3 in the report, to paragraph 2.3 of the report and 2.2, in particular to 2.2, which refers to part 3, paragraph 150 of the statutory guidance, and the statutory guidance that we're now working towards and that the policy has been complied in relation to and prepared relates to the fact that obviously the 21 Act required principal councils to broadcast meetings of the full council live as they happened. And the Welsh Government is saying this development will allow the public to follow the proceedings of the full council in real time. I've highlighted the fact that they're referring to full council because at the moment they are saying that this is the first step in respect of broadcasting, and that Welsh Government intend to extend this requirement by a number of other council meetings in the future. So, I mean, that's key for this particular policy at this moment in time. But as members will appreciate, the Vale Council has agreed that all meetings will be live streamed. The ones that they're undertaken on a remote basis will be live streamed, and we've been doing that for some time. And we have been broadcasting them live on the web. So we are one of not many authorities who've actually been doing that now for some time. We are live streaming all our meetings. Some councils only live stream particular meetings, but the Vale has decided to live stream them all. But as you will see from 150 from the guidance, it does say that the council really should only be considering full council meetings at this time, but it is a matter for the council to consider. If I can then go
Chair,
on.
I can see that Debbie Miles has, indicated she wants to speak.
Yeah.
But if wants to interrupt.
Oh, yes.
Because I'm reading from the report on screen, I can't actually see the hands up. Sorry, Chair.
Thank you. It was at that particular point that I particularly wanted to come in, and hopefully I'm not going to ruin your flow, Karen, but this is such a key point, and it is something. It's a point that I think it's fair to say within the office we agonised over, and as monitoring officers, so the key point is monitoring officer. Section 46 of the 21 Act set out those meetings which should be broadcast. And I think, and Karen is absolutely right. I think we were one of a handful possibly of councils which adopted that very sort of like purist approach based on the provisions. That there were other provisions within section 46 which did cater for, and I particularly wanted to flag these up because they're not picked up in the report. Section 46(6) and section 46(7) are particularly relevant. Section 46(6) refers to a principal council making arrangements required by subsection 1, so that's about which meetings they broadcast live, must have regard to any guidance about the exercise of that function issued by the Welsh Minister. So the guidance which was published on the 15th of June is guidance as per that section. So it's right and proper that we should be reviewing our position with regards to broadcasting in light of that guidance. And as Karen has highlighted, and particularly pertinent is that provision in paragraph 2.2 of the report, which refers to and it's set out there because it is so key. Should not council should not be seen as a prohibition on councils to broadcast other meetings of the council. So what we have seen throughout the guidance is a lot more flexibility than the way the legislation was initially drafted. And of course, there is that provision that we should have regard to that now. So I just wanted to particularly emphasise that. As far as had we decided not to broadcast all of the meetings as listed in section 46 initially, which, as we've mentioned, other authorities in Wales chose to adopt that approach. It's important also just to flag up the validity of those meetings, those proceedings were not affected by the availability of the broadcast. So I think a lot of authorities were relying upon that provision. But yeah, I just wanted to pause at this point because that is such a key point. And I'll reserve any further comments to the end.
Okay, thank you much, Debbie. I'm just looking to clarify slightly on this. So the statutory guidance refers to the full council as being required to be broadcast live. This council has broadcast live almost all meetings except for those which are notice being internal or physical meetings, such as senior management appointments committees, etc. There is, can I just confirm, there's no intention to backslide on the previous commitments to broadcast meetings as broadcast meetings live. So we are going to continue doing that in future. Is that correct? You're on mute, Debbie.
The report, as we go through the report, suggests that certain meetings will continue to be hybrid and broadcast live. So the intention isn't entirely as we have done up until now, but certainly the full council meeting, the intention is that should always be broadcast live, albeit elsewhere in the guidance it does talk about that you could have flexibility as to whether the meeting is hybrid or remote. So that's quite interesting. But on the point of broadcast, absolutely for the council meeting to be broadcast live.
Okay, I know we're going to come into perhaps a lot of detail later on this, but I just want to ensure that we have I set over distinctions between broadcasting meetings live, whatever the meeting is, and the style and the way in which the meeting is held. So I'm just looking to to separate those two things out, because we might get into a bit of a mess later on. I can see that Councillor Marnie's got his hand up, but unless it's urgent and on this point, I'd like to get through the reports and then we'll bring councillors in. Is that okay, Kevin?
Yes, obviously, as long as I'm allowed to make my point at the end, which I assume is the intention. Yeah, okay,
Yes,
thank you very much.
Certainly can, yes. Okay. Thank you,
And I
Debbie. Thank you, Debbie.
Yes, and I think the answer is at 216 of the report, but I'll let Karen proceed.
Thanks, Karen.
Yes, thanks, Debbie. I was just going to mention at 2.16 and 2.18 of the report, the areas that Debbie was referring to then. If I can just sort of then just go back to the background a bit, really, because the MLM policy set out the details of the arrangements that are being proposed, and these are guided by a number of principles, one being transparency, accessibility, good conduct, Welsh language, local needs and future generations. So all those elements have been considered when the policy has been drafted, and indeed were considered when the interim policy came out, the interim guidance came out, you know, in 21. So basically, I mean, the committee is being asked to consider the appendix and to make, you know, any recommendations to Cabinet or to endorse the document as they see fit. I have highlighted, as I said earlier, some suggested amendments in the document. Having reviewed the document, we've taken out some aspects as well, and we've also made some extra clarification comments in the document for, you know, for clarification purposes for the public and for members. Another aspect which is within the document relates to the Welsh language service provider. Now, as you will appreciate, Councillor Johnson, and I know you've raised this with me in the past, that we must treat English and Welsh the same. And again, the intention is to do that within this policy. Unfortunately, Cardiff Council, who are our current provider, require a minimum of 3 working days notice to ensure that a translator is available to support a meeting. And to address this, obviously members will appreciate that recently we circulated a survey to all members of the council and co-opted members with the purpose of establishing members' preference as to what they wanted to speak at particular meetings. And that survey has come back, and obviously as a result of that, and in relation to the 3 days notice, we've also amended the policy having regard to that fact. There will be an impact for members of the public in relation to the planning, speaking of planning guides and the scrutiny committee guides, because currently the registration process is slightly different. But what it means is, it means the public will be able to see the agendas sooner, because obviously to comply with the 3 days notice, we are bringing the agenda dispatch earlier in the process. And obviously English and Welsh then are treated exactly the same. So if anybody wanted to speak in English or wanted to speak in Welsh, they just make that, they just tick the box on the registration to speak process. So I just wanted to highlight that because I know we've had those discussions, Councillor Johnson. The impact really is around the fact that there's a small pool of translators throughout Wales, and as you can appreciate, a lot of the authorities are using that small pool. So for the benefit of the public as well, those agendas now are being dispatched earlier so they can actually see what's going out onto an agenda sooner rather than later. So we will be amending those public speaking guides following consideration by Cabinet in this committee as to the way forward. Debbie mentioned 2.16 in the report, which refers to the matters regarding council meetings being hybrid and broadcast live. And as you will see from the report, we are recommending full council, cabinet, planning, governance and audit, and a scrutiny committee meeting that is to consider a matter of significant county-wide interest to be undertaken on that hybrid basis. And the matter of significant county-wide interest to be discussed with the chair of the scrutiny committee in conjunction with the chief executive. Other ad hoc meetings can also be arranged in this way to be webcast by the chair of the committee, relevant committee, and the chief executive we are suggesting. However, the importance here is the key here is the increase will require additional resources, and to support that, not only in time by Democratic Services officers and ICT officers, but obviously the cost of that. So obviously, having regard to the guidance that we've now received, the statutory guidance, this policy has now been considered in those wider parameters, having regard also then to ensuring that certain committee meetings are undertaken on a hybrid basis, which will allow for people to come into the civic offices and the public and or be at home, whichever they wish to be, for those specific meetings, and other meetings be undertaken on a remote basis. The guidance is very clear. It's a matter for the council to decide how it wishes to operate, and having regard to a number of elements which I've just mentioned. With regard to training, obviously training will be included for elected members and those participating in meetings. There is some training that will be required in using the microphones within the chamber, and how obviously for the chairs in managing a hybrid meeting, because this is going to be a different scenario just to providing it remotely, because they're going to have to be dealing with members and the public who may be coming in remotely and somebody in the actual chamber itself. So obviously our hybrid solution that we are looking to procure shortly, we're going to have to take advantage of those as well. There's also some elements within the guidance that has been given at 15138, chapter 15 and paragraph 138 to 152, about actually providing some general principles for chairing meetings, for chairs and vice chairs of council meetings, because of this need now in working with a hybrid basis. There are, within the policy document that I have attached to as Appendix 1 to the report, I have highlighted for those who have copies or can see on screen the red sections, which refers to, on page 32, etiquette at remote and multi-location meetings, and there is some additional bullet points there that have been highlighted, that have been included within the document that we've had from Welsh Government, and some extra interesting bits and pieces there for members within the documents that we've had from Welsh Government that provide some assistance to members in preparing for such meetings that take place. I think it's probably best that I do stop there, Chair, now, and offer the ability now for members to comment on the document. As you will see from the recommendations, we are asking committee to note the council's current policy within the constitution that has been reviewed in light of the provisions that I've referred to, and in particular to the statutory and non-statutory guidance we've only recently received. That you consider as a committee and make any comments that you wish to make on the appendix, and that we're also recommending that it will continue to be reviewed. And also, as I've said earlier, we will be waiting further guidance from Welsh Government on which committee meetings they feel should go further with hybrid and broadcasting. And obviously, when that's received, we will be updating the document and bringing it to Democratic Services, because Democratic Services within the guidance is seen to be the committee that should lead on this and make any recommendations to Cabinet and full council for inclusion within the Constitution.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Karen. That was a whistle-stop tour through a quite lengthy document, which includes a number of, I think, fairly meaty topics for this committee, which include, not exclusively, but include, broadcasting of meetings, the location of meetings, and interaction between members at meetings, Welsh language requirements of that need to be attached to this, and I don't think it refers to it in the appendix, but we haven't really talked about the electronic voting and how that's also, because I think there's a lot of interaction between all of the different things that take place here. So can I ask for members of the committee who want to speak on this item, please raise your hands. I know Councillor Marnie said earlier, so can I call him in first? Kevin, are you there? Okay, not hearing anything from Councillor Mann. In that case, can I go to Councillor Carroll?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Karen and Debbie, for the presentation. A few questions, if I may, please, in relation to the draft document. First and foremost, I note that we're going to be moving to a hybrid model for scrutiny committees of significant public interest. I would just ask at first instance why that isn't the default for all scrutiny committee meetings, because obviously that would not preclude members who wish to join virtually from doing so, but at the same time would allow that in-person interaction that I know some members prefer. Secondly, and it touches on the point that you raised, Chair, regarding the live broadcast of meetings. I completely agree with the sentiment that you were expressing. I think it would be deeply regressive and looked upon very unfavourably by the public were we, now that we have a facility in place to broadcast all meetings live, to decide suddenly to not do so. Now, I appreciate that the document in question does make provision for meetings to be broadcast, but I note at 4.17.3.21c, it states that other committees, including the annual meeting, other committee meetings, including the annual meeting, will be conducted and broadcast on a remote basis. It might be helpful to tighten up the wording there, and in between broadcast and on, it might be helpful to add in live there, just so that there's no avoidance of doubt in the policy on there. I would suggest for committee to consider that. Another point I'd raise, and it's very helpful actually, for obvious reasons, the Senior Management Appointment Committee meets in person rather than virtually. I think we'd all agree that when you're interviewing candidates, it would be unsuitable to do so in a remote format. I was just wondering if Debbie could direct me to the provision in the legislation or guidance that allows for that to take place, and whether that could be applied to other meetings, but perhaps full council, for example. And then a final one. I note that at 4.17.3.14, under etiquette, members are expected to dress appropriately for the meeting. Now, the chairman is far more appropriately dressed than me, with a jacket and tie on. But I would just be grateful if perhaps there could be some guidance on that, because I've seen members turn up to meetings in t-shirts, etc., in the past, and obviously one's definition of appropriate may be different to another. So if we could provide some information on what constitutes appropriate, to make sure for myself as much as anybody else that I don't fall foul of that policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. I'm just wondering, Karen, are you taking answers to this, or is Debbie? I think the use of the just a moment. I think the first question that Councillor Carroll raised, which is around the definition of the discussion around which meetings are held or identified as being held as hybrid, I think is probably quite key to discussion about this document today. I'm sure it's something that a lot of councillors will want to query. So having an explanation on that, I think, would be a very good starting point. Debbie or Karen, if you want to choose, goes first.
Karen, do you want to jump in and then I'll sort of finish off?
First of all, Chair, if I could just mention in regard to Councillor Carroll's point on about meetings being hybrid or remote, the guidance does say that some authorities may decide that all meetings will be conducted through remote means by default, but relevant authorities may wish to adopt different approaches for different bodies and for different circumstances. So, you know, it's quite wide range in there, but it's around resourcing. You know, we have to be mindful of the resourcing of not only the team, but other aspects, other officers within the council, ICT services, the resource implications for undertaking them on, you know, all meetings on that basis can be significant. So I just wanted to highlight that point, which has come from the guidance itself. And then in relation to the hybrid situation and regard to scrutiny committees not being part, it does say in the guidance, and I know Councillor Carroll appreciated that we have said that where there is something of a county-wide interest, because we have looked at the analytics relating to how many people are watching and viewing these meetings, and it's not as high as you might wish to think it is. So we've looked at all that, and having considered the impact on resources, that is why we recommend in, the course of action that we're recommending.
Thank you, Karen. Debbie?
Yeah, shall I just come in on the point with regards to in-person meeting? So because of the nature of the Senior Management Appointment Committee, obviously it's our view that that would be an in-person meeting, and I think that would probably be supported by that committee. If there was an individual member on that committee that did feel that they would rather join remotely, I'm sure that would be accommodated. I mean, certainly the Senior Management Appointment Committee is a committee of the council, and in line with section 46 and 47, if a member did feel strongly they wanted to join remotely, there is that legal right. So under the legislation, it doesn't specify that certain meetings have to be held in person, but it's the nature of the meeting. And as I've mentioned, the guidance is very flexible. It's certainly added that extra layer to the statutory provision, which we've been working to since May 21. I hope that assists.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. Is there somebody who can respond on dressing appropriately at remote or MLM meetings?
I think that's a matter for the members, really, Chair. And I think the guidance, the statutory guidance has come through is clear, and I think it's something that members need to consider when they're attending meetings. And if there are any challenges to that, then I'm sure we can have those conversations.
Okay, thank you both for the responses. Can I just check with Councillor Carroll is happy or wants to respond to anything that's been said there?
No, for once, I think all of my questions were answered. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. I will want to come back on some of those things myself later on, but I think it's right there that people speak first. Councillor Marnie?
Yes, I'm back now. I have to apologise yet again. The Vale IT equipment, it's in and out. I can't turn the thing on and off, so you'll have to bear with me if I suddenly cut out. You know what's happened. I know Nick Wheel is here, so I won't go on. I won't express my opinion of the IT department yet again. I think that's well known. I mean, here we are here again. Another reason why these things are a disaster. Anyway, getting back to the point in hand, surely we should be live streaming every single meeting that was previously open to the public in bygone years. I mean, we seem to be cutting out the public right, left and centre. Secondly, quite obviously, our meetings should be held either in certainly the full council meetings in the council chamber or live in committee rooms as they were. And it should be a case of the staff are in the county hall running these things with the councillors who wish to attend in person, and then we cater remotely for those who may wish to. It seems to me yet again it's the tail wagging the dog. The people not attending would be the minority, I'd have thought. Who knows? But that's not really the point. If even one councillor wants to attend in person, then the staff should be in the county hall. And it's quite simple. So there's 2 points there. One, we should have full live streaming for anything to the public, for anything that was open to the public to attend before. And B, we need to get back in that chamber, except for those who either don't want to, who can't, or whatever. And that was what the provision was for those who can't make it. The handful who supposedly can't, rather than the rest of us who should be in there with all the staff. I mean, that's fairly obvious. And in regards, I don't know, it was a facetious comment by Councillor Cowell about attire. The situation is, every single full council meeting I've attended in 11 years, I've attended dressed in a suit, where others have been dressed in t-shirts and jeans and God knows what. But it's always been my experience that in scrutiny meetings or other meetings, remote from, not remote, but other than full on, people will turn up in more casual attire. I couldn't care less. If you're going to say everyone turns up in a suit, fine. Well, I never used to in full council meetings, apart from myself and a number of others. So I don't know why I actually raised that point now, but if you wanted clarification, so be it. If you want all of us here to be sat in a suit, I'll wear a suit next time. But I certainly always have done and always will do to full council meetings. But again, we should be back in that chamber, and I don't know why we're not back in that chamber. And if people want to join remotely or hybrid because they can't make it, for example, then they are the exception to the rule, and provision should be made for them. But the full provision is for that staff to be in that county chamber, along with what I would suspect to be the majority of the council. Okay, thank you very much. And as I say, if I have anything else to say, see my hand go up and nothing seems to be happening, you'll know it'll be the wonderful Vela Glamorgan IT equipment yet again at fault, rather than myself for once. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marnie. I don't think that Councillor Carroll was being facetious. I think he was, asking a genuine question about something that was being included within the guidance here, and asking what does it mean, and wasn't referring to any particular individual.
Okay, my apologies. Yeah. I appreciate
it's a question that's worth asking. If we're saying dress appropriately, what does that mean?
I see.
So that's 4.17.3.14 etiquette at remote multi-location meetings. If you're interested, Councillor Marnie. Can I bring in Debbie Miles, who I think will probably want to respond to the point about our live broadcast of meetings.
Yes, thank you. I think it's fair to say that broadcasting live meetings adds another resourcing layer. If it was just a case of one member of staff being able to multitask and cover all of the functions, the clerking, supporting role, the broadcasting, the IT requirements, I don't think it would necessarily be such an issue, but it isn't feasible. So what we have been seeing over the last year or so is a terrific strain on a small pool of staff. And I'm, as monitoring officer, as one of the line managers with responsibility here, I'm conscious that the council has contractual arrangements in place with staff, and I'm also aware of the wellbeing implications for staff. And the concern is that, and as is reflected in the report, that if we were to go beyond the point that is recommended, we would need to consider additional resources. So I think it's important that we do bear in mind that the council is in contractual arrangements for certain hours of work with staff, and we need to respect that. So it is a real issue that we've looked long and hard at. I think also it's worth just flagging up, we are in a new age. We have the statutory provision, we have the guidance, and I think paragraph 1523 is a key provision within the guidance, and I'll just read briefly from that, where it refers to physical meetings should not be seen as representing the gold standard, with multi-location meetings being second best. Physical meetings may be convenient and effective for those most familiar with and comfortable with how they work, but they may also be inaccessible and impractical to many. And all meetings that meet the required communication and core arrangements have equal status under the law. So I think that is really important to flag up. I can see Councillor Marnie has his hand up. If I can just finish just two other small points, and it's worth just teasing out in paragraph 2.2 of the report that there is reference there to, as part of the strategy, council should explore the views of the public about which of the council meetings they consider should be broadcast. And this is a piece of work which we're factoring in with Democratic Services, working with colleagues elsewhere within the Directorate, that when we are going out to consult, have a participation piece with the public, that we do also reflect on this just to test and to see whether we should then come back with a further review. So I think, as Karen has mentioned, as part of the guidance, we are required to revisit it, review, and that engaging with the public would be a key point at which we would then come back to committee and feedback those views at that point. And lastly, if I may, and I don't want to go into the detail at this point, but to be fair to my colleagues from ICT, if Councillor Marnie has any particular points that he would like to raise with regards to any difficulties experiencing, if he could put those in writing, by all means, to Nick Wheeler, but also myself, I'd be grateful, as this is not the arena for that discussion. Thank you.
Well, it is,
Thank you
but
much, Debbie. Kevin, before
right to work, it is in the arena, isn't it? Sorry to cut across you there, Ian.
Yeah,
it is in the arena, and I can't get the camera. You just witnessed it yourself, didn't you, when you asked me to speak earlier? So yet again. Anyway, you're quite rightly, I'll take that up with whoever yet again. Just one point I did want to make. So we're not just catering for people from home. We're discriminating against those who want to attend, and we're also discriminating against the public who want to attend meetings. And seems like we're going to be discriminating against these who wish to watch live, even online, if you're going to cut out some of the meetings which were previously allowed to be seen by the public. So here's an idea. Let's stop discriminating against those who wish to be in a chamber or council meeting face to face, and let's cater for those who don't wish to be. But how can you discriminate against one set of people with certain views and not the others? Let's discriminate against those who want to join online, and in that case, is it? Because why should you choose from one set of people to another when you can cater for both, and should be catering for both, as far as I'm concerned? And that's my last word. Thank you very much, Ian and others.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Marnie. There's obviously a large number of members of the committee who wish to speak. So can I start with Councillor Ewan Goodchon, please?
Thank you, Chair. And can I begin by agreeing with Councillor Carroll on a few points? First off, addressing appropriately, I think definitely should be taken on a case-by-case basis, as some people are within the council are disabled or differently abled, and should be considered if they have special circumstances where they cannot dress in certain ways, for whatever reason that might be. It's quite important in the future as well. I would agree with Councillor Carroll on the point with scrutiny committees. For me, that's on the basis that, as far as I'm concerned, most scrutiny committee meetings do consider matters of significant county-wide interest. And personally, I can't think of a corporate performance scrutiny committee meeting that I've attended that I wouldn't argue is within that category. So I would personally argue that having all scrutiny committees on a hybrid basis and webcasted would be a good idea. I would quickly like to mention about on 4.17.3.6 C, what is now C. I'd like to mention about public viewings. I think it's an important thing to note that if you are requiring certain members of the public to contact Democratic Services in the civic offices one working day before the date of the meeting, then members of the public cannot simply walk into the civic offices to attend meetings. And while I understand that's an important staffing issue for Democratic Services, I think it is important that members of the public who do find out about a meeting that is of particular interest, of course, if they're going to speak, that is a different matter, but if they are simply there to observe, they do not have access to a device, that perhaps they should be allowed in no matter the circumstances, and perhaps it should simply be that we advise that they contact the meeting, and perhaps a few days before might be a good idea. But I think it's a principle that we should not be allowing that to be a barrier of entry. I'd quickly like to highlight on G on that section that scrutiny committees are allowed to have expert witnesses, which I would encourage more people to take awareness of when considering different items, that it may be something that scrutiny committees may wish to do in the future. And also, finally, I would like to probably a query for Debbie on 4.17.3.14, the addition of the Nolan principles being included as part of the etiquette in remote and multi-location meetings is an interesting addition and probably a good one, but I'd be interested as to the practical changes that has. Does that give the chair more powers if there are potential breaches of the Nolan principles during meetings, as to what might occur, or is things effectively the same via the normal standards process? Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Goodjohn. Can I revert to Debbie Miles, please?
Thank you. Yes, it serves as a reminder, so that's the key aspect there. But it would be through the normal procedure. But indeed, you know, a chair, vice chair of a scrutiny committee, a committee could remind a member of that provision within the multi-location meeting policy. But yes, it would be then through our other channels. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn and Debbie. I think there were points raised there by Councillor Goodjohn with regard to broadcast of, regard to scrutiny meetings and with regards to meeting attendance at civic offices in person, which we might want to pick up later on as a committee. Can I call in Councillor Neil Thomas, please?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I apologise for being late? I was at another meeting, and it was important that I was at. First, I endorse Councillor Goodjohn's comments and support them. I think that access to meetings by members of the public, our residents, is important, and people occasionally, on the spur of a moment, decide that they would like to see what's going on, and to exclude them because they don't give a day's notice, I think would be undemocratic. I have a particular point that I wanted to raise, and that's 4.17.3.20b, where it talks about having to give apologies for absence a week in advance, which is, I think, would be often impractical. In fact, my apologies for this meeting for being late were given to, I could only give them today because the meeting that I was at came in late last week, and I think putting that 1 week restriction might be it is onerous. I think it's a mistake, but that may have been covered already. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I think, and this is maybe it's in the drafting of this, that the and Karen will tell me if I've picked up the wrong end of the stick here as well. That the intention is that you will be able to give your apologies up to 7 days after the meeting. So if you were unable to attend a meeting but nobody was aware of it and you were unable to give apologies on your behalf, you would be able to give your apologies up to 7 days after the meeting taking place, and that would then still be included within the minutes when they are published.
In that case, I apologise now.
I don't think it's as clearly as it maybe could do. So maybe that's worth considering there, Karen.
I could clarify that. Yes, Chair. Just for the benefit of those viewing at home as well. The Welsh Government, one of the duties of the Welsh Government is that we have to undertake a decision notice from a meeting. So when a meeting takes place, within 7 days of that meeting, including the day of the meeting, so within 7 working days, we have to publish a decision notice. And the members then have got 7 days to let us know if they want to give us their apologies. After that 7 days, the decision notice is published. But I can certainly clarify in the policy, Chair, before it goes to Cabinet, to make that a bit more clearer, if that's what you would like. I
think, Karen, that if it explains 7 days after the meeting, in one form or another, and that would make it clear, because I don't think it is phenomenally clear, and I think it's quite. I understand Councillor Thomas's confusion that, of course, we don't know 7 days before a meeting whether we are unable to attend, especially something short notice.
Okay,
Thomas.
I think it's because it's in the present rather than the past. If the word ARER is changed to were unable to attend, then that would help.
I think we'll just leave it to Karen to provide a clarification in the when this goes to cabinet. So thank you very much, Councillor Thomas. Can I go to Councillor Perks, please?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that you know, we've actually now got the technology to be able to have hybrid meetings. You know, many years ago, it was you had to be in the chamber or in a meeting room to actually take part. But now I think this allows the democratic process to actually flourish a little bit more. We don't know the particular circumstances of all councillors and why they might need to be hybrid, or if they choose to be, you know, sort of sitting in their kitchen as I am now, you know, partaking in the meeting. And I just think that, you know, the idea of presenteeism is gone, because we can mix the two, and I think that's really important, and what this document sets out, and it shows that, you know, the gold standard of being present isn't necessarily, you know, what is seen to we need to do these days, and I just think a mixture of the two is important. I think you know, ensuring that we review these meetings, you know, review the policy and how it's going, that we discuss with the public, is really important to find out that, you know, whether they feel that they can actually take part, they feel part of it, and they feel that it's open enough, you know, when we're discussing important items and things like that. So that's all I wanted to say, really, and I welcome this this report and what's there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. I don't think there are any further questions that come from that. So can I move to Councillor Prothero, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to probably repeat a lot that's already been said. I think it's really important that the work of scrutiny is transparent and that it's seen, because that in itself is just as important as the decisions made. So I guess my instinct would be that we need to keep as much of scrutiny live streamed as possible, and I do understand the reasons why Council has already considered only doing things that it sees as being of county-wide interest, and the reasons being that there aren't that many people who are watching the live streams. But I would ask this, not that we consult with the public on what they want to see, but possibly we do more work to enlighten the public to the reason why it might be of interest for them to start watching the work. And I don't know how much of that really goes on. But that's about it, really. And I think I agree with what everybody has said about what is appropriate dress. It's a bit subjective, that word. It means something completely different to some and some to the others. So I would probably say clarity would be really good on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Prothero. Debbie Miles has raised her hand, wishes to speak.
Thank you. Just on this point about live broadcasting, and it's just a highlight, and I think it is made clear in the report, but I thought for the benefit of the meeting, worth just sort of highlighting it again, that for those meetings which wouldn't be broadcast live, the intention would be for that webcast to be uploaded the next day. So as you'll appreciate, a lot of our meetings are evening meetings, and for those meetings, so if it was with regards to the scrutiny committee, not a nationwide, sorry, not a county-wide significant item, the intention would be that the footage would be uploaded the next day. So it wouldn't be that it wouldn't be uploaded, but there would be that slight delay. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. I'm aware that Councillor Carroll's had his hand up for a while, but as he's spoken already, if I could go to Councillor Hanks first, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted some clarification from Debbie, please. Am I on the understanding that contractual arrangements for staff are preventing us having face-to-face meetings, in particular for full council? Was that my understanding or not?
Debbie?
Should I come in there? No, the point I raised about contractual hours was with regards to having regard to capacity and use of resources, and it was just highlighting the point. I think it was in respect to the question raised by Councillor Marnie, that you know, officers should be in the office and rather than at home, and it was to highlight the fact that with the hybrid approach, remote approach, and we are required to provide that option for certain meetings. The majority of the meetings have, you know, to provide that option. But that in itself it does mean that one officer cannot perform all of the duties which are required to assist a chair of a meeting. So we would need the Democratic Services Officer to be supporting the chair of the meeting, but in addition there would need to be a Democratic Services Officer dealing with the broadcasting element, and of course the potential for ICT colleagues to be called upon. So it was in that context that there is a greater call on resources. Now, it might be that could be addressed through additional staff or additional resources, but given the existing pool of staff and the existing contractual hours, because obviously I would say this as the council's monitoring officer and head of legal, I'm mindful that with staff we are in a contractual arrangement for staff to work certain hours. So it was just highlighting that it's not comparing apples with apples, looking back to the pre-COVID situation when it was just physical meetings. Hopefully that clarifies the point.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hanks. Thank you, Debbie. I'm going to go down to some people for a second bite of the cherry, but obviously we have spent nearly an hour on this item, but it's a big item. Councillor Carroll.
Yes, it was just to assure Councillor Marnie my comments weren't directed at any member individually. It was genuinely that I thought that the policy was somewhat ambiguous, and to be honest, I think it's the first time I've ever seen it written down before now, so just wanted some clarity on it.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Marnie.
Yeah, thanks. Well, my apologies on that. No, Ian did clarify that, and ironically, you and I and Ian and a number of others are people who always do dress for full council meetings and what's in. But I appreciate that I mistook the nuance of what you were saying there. So no problem with that. I was just going to come back in anyway to say that after a lot of fiddling again with the mic and camera, didn't think I'd be able to get back on again. Is that I think everybody seems to be missing my point that. You keep talking about hybrid here, there, and everywhere. Fine, I've got no problem with that. But we haven't got hybrid meetings, have we? They're all remote. That's my point. So those who wish to take part in hybrid meetings, espousing how great it is and all this, or how convenient it might be, great. But it's not a hybrid meeting. That's my point. So we need to stop using the word hybrid, don't we? We're not having hybrid meetings. That means those of us who wish to go into the chamber or meeting room along with the staff can do so. And I don't quite understand the bit about the staff won't be able to cope if they're in the meeting. Well, surely they'd have the same equipment that they're using now to run the meeting. So I don't get that. And we used to do it before. So what's the problem? But again, I know I repeat myself, they're not hybrid meetings, are they? Let's have hybrid meetings. I'm all in favour of them, but we're not having them. Let's have them, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marnie. Debbie's come back on screen, but I want to actually make a couple of comments myself, if people don't mind. We've had, I think we've had a good discussion that's taken us around an hour. There's a couple of points that have been raised for for clarification regarding recording of attendance and absences. There's been some queries raised around being able to attend meetings, members of the public being able to attend the civic offices in person without giving prior notice. And part of the that paragraph seems to suggest that should only be allowed if people are unable to view on the internet, which seems to be a bit of a misnomer and is where some of this is as Councillor Marnie says, sort of slightly talking at odds with each other about this. There's also a point raised around the hybrid and broadcast of scrutiny meetings. One thing that I wanted to raise, and I wanted to raise at the start, and I'm interested that people haven't quite raised, although Councillor Marnie's touched on it, is that we've had a lot of discussion within here about resources, about there's this requires additional resources, but I've not seen any quantum within any of our documentation about what that means in practice. I think we all recognise that democracy costs, that transparency costs, that engagement with the public costs. So if we're doing things, are we not doing things as well as we could because we have resource constraints? And if we have resource constraints, what does it take to resolve those? The head of Democratic Services writes an annual report for this committee in which they explain whether they do or do not have sufficient resources. For me, as the chair of the Democratic Services Committee, and also as an opposition councillor, I feel concerned, unnerved that there are shortcuts, or we are not doing everything that we could or should be doing to promote the work that's taking place. So the idea, I think, as if I can echo Councillor Goodjohn, all of the scrutiny committee meetings that I've attended, for whatever of the 5 scrutiny meetings, have been of county-wide relevance. It's actually the place that almost all, certainly all non-cabinet members will participate in those meetings. It seems an anathema to me that is not suggested automatically. And Welsh Government obviously themselves have to deal with 22 local authorities that do things quite differently to each other. But it seems an anathema to me that is not automatically the scrutiny of cabinets and of our senior officers. For me, is the work of the council, as opposed to some meetings which may be quite theatrical, but are less the work that goes on and the work that needs to be documented and seen by others, and also, if I dare say it, improved by us being in the room together. It's not want to go too far on a tangent. In recent weeks, I've been to events in Penarth and in Cowbridge, and I've met councillors for the first time. We've been elected for 15 months or so now, and yet I'm still meeting people in person for the first time, and having real life conversations and finding elements of things that we agree on in person that maybe we'd never do so if we were having a remote meeting. Obviously, I'm aware that Democratic Services are working hard behind the scenes to find a solution to the problems that we've had about having hybrid meetings, and I'm hoping that we can have some sense of a timetable on that and when that will be happening. And of course, we have some meetings that have been suggested as being hybrid, but I would certainly like this committee, with the committee's permission, and somebody wants to move it, to recommend that certainly in policy terms, that scrutiny meetings should also be included within those hybrid and broadcast live, because I think that's important for the workings of this council. I think we should consider, and again, it is a resource issue around the civic offices being open for members of the public when a hybrid meeting is taking place and people will be in the civic offices. I suppose there's further clarification about are people allowed to the civic offices when it's a remote meeting and nobody's going to be in the civic offices? Is that part of tidying up? Because if the idea of that section, paragraph, is that people who do not have internet access can attend in person, at the council. That only works if it's a if it is a meeting where people will be present, and otherwise that doesn't work. Yeah.
Chair, can I clarify just to make sure that I'm
Yeah.
getting the right point here? It's not, the policy doesn't intend stopping members of the public coming into the building to view a remote meeting and or stop them from coming into a council meeting that's being held on a hybrid basis. They can do that. They can come in to a meeting that's being held on a hybrid basis. That's not an issue. So they would come to planning, they would come to council.
Yeah.
If it's a remote meeting, we are asking them to, could they let us know at least a day before, so we can make those arrangements if it's being held remotely, so they can come in and view it in the building. It's not the intention to stop people coming in on a hybrid or an in-person, because even with senior management, they could come in for the first bits of the senior management, the apologies and declarations, which indeed has happened in the past, but they would have to leave then for the part 2 element of the interview. But I just wanted to clarify that, because this policy doesn't intend stopping members of the public coming in at all.
Okay, can I suggest that that you take a look at that paragraph, because it suggests that people, I think it just needs to be made clear that that refers to remote meetings, and perhaps that should maybe be split up into 2 paragraphs.
No, that's fine.
You know, if that works, makes it flow better. I don't know if Councillor, I think it was Councillor Goodjohn's point on it, wasn't it? I don't know if he's got any comments on that.
That's fine. Yeah.
That makes sense, Ewan?
Yeah, can I definitely move your point on the scrutiny committees, that all scrutiny committees should be held on a hybrid basis and webcast. And yeah, I would absolutely agree. Some clarification would be needed, and to make sure that anyone can come in on a hybrid meeting or in-person meeting for part 1 items at any time, and that perhaps it is advised that they contact Democratic Services, but it's not required.
I think the clarification that's required in that paragraph is that there is a difference in how we are treating a remote meeting and a hybrid meeting. So in a hybrid meeting, anybody can come along and sit in the public gallery as they would have done previously. However, for a remote meeting, it wouldn't be anticipated that people would be in the chamber, and therefore there wouldn't be whether it's security in place or or somebody to open up and look after people, and therefore that's the purpose of being provided with advance notice if somebody wants to attend to view a remote meeting from the council.
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah, I think that needs to be maybe unpacked slightly, maybe perhaps 2 different paragraphs there. So do we, I know it's not necessarily part of the protocol here, but do we have an update on progress towards hybrid meetings, Karen?
Chair, I can let you, oh, well, I think Debbie wants to speak on that.
Yeah.
Yes, to be fair, for me to comment on that, I'd prefer to go into part 2, because we are at a sensitive stage on these matters, but more than happy to stay to the end of the meeting and move into part 2 at that point, if that would assist.
If we can provide an update to councillors at the end of the meeting under part 2, then that would be appropriate. If subject to that, obviously we are reviewing the multi-location meetings policy, which ironically has barely been allowed to be trialled in the last year because of some of the challenges that the council has had. However, we have a set of 3 recommendations here. We also have a I think, are we formally saying that Councillor Goodjohn has moved and I've seconded that that scrutiny meetings should be included within the list of hybrid meetings? Is that fair? Yes. And so can I have an indication if people are content with that as a proposal from this committee? I can see Councillor Goodjohn, Councillor Thomas. I don't know if there is anybody. I can see Councillor Prothero, Councillor Perks. Is there anybody who wishes to disagree with that? I'll take the silence as being an agreement then. We've also talked about redrafting areas around meeting attendance in person at the council chamber and the record of attendance. I don't think there are any other areas that were particularly highlighted. And then we have the 3 recommendations that were being given to the committee in advance. Do people want me to go through those individually, or are we happy to move the 3 of them? I mean, they are that we have reviewed we noted the policy and which has been reviewed. We've offered some comments on that, and this is approved. This is recommended to Cabinet approval, subject to the changes that we've recommended, and that this be revised in future. Are people happy with us with this recommendation? Yes.
Yes,
Thank you,
Chair.
Councillor Perks. So that's moved by Councillor Perks, and Councillor Thomas are giving a thumbs up. So excellent. So thank you very much, and then we will then return for an update on the move towards hybrid meetings and technology solutions into part 2 later on this meeting. Everybody happy with that? Great, thank you very much. In that case, we move on to item 5, which is the item from Chartered Self-Assessments, the evolution of the Wales Charter for Member Support and Development. And again, I think Karen Bowen is taking us through this. Karen?
Yeah, yes, Chair, thank you very much. That's lovely, thank you. The executive summary refers to the fact that most members who are members of the council now may not have been party to the fact that some 20 years ago a Welsh Charter for Member Support and Development was co-developed by the Welsh Local Government Association and local authorities in Wales. As the report says, the landscape has since changed as a result, and therefore WLGA have reviewed the charter and have come up with a suggested framework to go forward, and Appendix 5 is the suggested framework. It was co-developed by the WLGA and councils, as referred to in the background at 1.1, to provide a framework for good practice across Wales, be an incentive for councils to provide their councillors with the support and development they needed, and to provide assurance to councillors they would be given the best support possible. As I said, the Charter has been recently reviewed by the WLGA, and that's been done in conjunction with council representatives from the heads of democratic services across Wales. And although it's recognised that the Charter provided a framework for good practice, it is accepted, as I've referred to in paragraph 2.1 of the report, that there's now a need for a different framework to be considered and established, which reflects a more progressive approach to sector-led development. And I'm using the Welsh Local Government Association terminology there, and also having regard to Welsh Government legislation and all the statutory and non-statutory guidance that we've received recently and over the last few years. And Appendix 1 then is the suggested framework that has come through for consideration by committee. It covers 4 particular aspects. It talks about the aims of the framework, the principles for development, its scope, and then in the context. And of course, this is in the context of all the legislation and guidance that's recently come out, and that is, you know, and having a big regard to the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021. So the Appendix 1 is therefore for committee's consideration, really. It's based on the proposed aims and principles that we've highlighted earlier, and it's being really brought to this committee for comment. And if there's any suggestions then from the committee, either to endorse the framework in its entirety or to make any suggested comments back to Cabinet, as well as endorsing the framework. So really, committee really is over to the committee chair.
Thank you very much, Karen. Does anybody have any comments on the documents being provided for us? Councillor Hans?
Thank you, Chair. Karen, I was just wondering if it means an awful lot more work for you. Is the workload different? And I just wondered that really, if there was more work involved in this.
There will be an amount of work involved, but obviously part of that work is being undertaken through the development of the needs analysis, through the performance appraisals, you know, the PDRs that you're undertaking with the head of democratic services. But yes, there is will be a significant amount of work, but it's also about sharing good practice. So it's really how you as members wish to take this forward. you know, because there will be a responsibility on yourselves to take part in this
So
as
there'll
well.
be more work for you and more work for us as well, but a better outcome.
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanks. Any other comments on this? Just should I just make Councillor Carroll?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Karen. I appreciate this isn't this authority's document, but I would say I find in the appendix the priorities a bit wrong. I mean, it's sort of like the first things that are listed. It seems to be more virtue signalling than actually delivering for communities. I mean, we talk about things like diversity declarations and all of that. I mean, I would prefer to see outcomes be more focused on getting the bins collected, potholes being repaired, verges being cut. I mean, those are the issues that residents tend to raise with me. And I would like to see delivering results of that nature to be more prominent and front of centre.
That's certainly what, as you as a councillor would see as a priority. That's not an issue at all. As far as the document refers to, under the proposal, it actually says it's a framework, but however, as the priorities and resources are different throughout local authorities within Wales, then it would be up for individual council to decide how much of the framework they use. So it's a matter for us as a council really going forward, how we want to reprioritise those principles.
Councillor Carroll, anything you want to come back on that? Or?
No, as I said, it was more an observation than anything else. So I think it's been placed on the record. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
It's designed as a starting point for discussion, so it may be that this committee may wish to set up a working group to look into more detail. It's a matter for you as councillors, really, how you want to proceed with this. We could do that, or you could just endorse the framework, and we work alongside it going forward.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Karen. I'm certainly the first priority is which councillors and how they are elected, and what sort of community they come from, what the diversity within the community is, or whether the diversity within the community is represented. Therefore, I can see why the candidate and prospective candidate stuff is the first priority within the document. I'd move this document. I'd move that we endorse this document as a whole, as it stands, and that we approve it. Thank you.
Councillor Perks.
I'll second that.
Okay, thanks very much. Is there anybody else who wants to speak to the document? I just want to make some brief comments, because I think that's if I just follow up on Councillor Carroll's point, I think there's an interesting discussion around process versus what outcomes look like, and what do how councillors perceive successful outcomes. I was just going to flag up that, as I think Councillor Hanks said, that obviously the implementation of any new framework and a piece of work involves does have resource implications, which we've already had flagged up earlier in today's meeting. I was wondering though about the status of our diversity declaration, which was passed as a council probably nearly 2 years ago now, and sort of where that's been considered or ensured that those promises have been completed. I was interested by the comments regarding officer support here, about whether officer and whether overview and scrutiny committees have dedicated support from officers who can provide impartial research support and advice, which is obviously something that we don't do, I think, as an authority. We don't have a research services similar to the research services in the Senedd or the library in the Houses of Parliament, for example. So there are considerations in here. Another point that I think the WLGA maybe misses in general is the role of political parties and groups as in terms of this these processes, because these don't appear in vacuums. And while at town and community council level we may have a lot of independents, and the overall perhaps the second biggest group in Wales, independents, largely in more rural areas, in lots of local authorities. It's these are groups of political parties who operate together, and therefore ensuring that political parties play a role both in their candidate selection or in ensuring appropriate standards of conduct is an important part, because these aren't twin track independent processes. So we've had a move that we endorse the framework that's been proposed to us. I mean, I've added some comments in there, and I know that others have said, which hopefully they'll be part of the discussion here. But are we happy with moving forward on that? Councillor Carroll?
I suppose I'm going to be outnumbered, but if I could register my dissent for the minutes, thank you.
That's fine. I'll be honest. I think this is a piece of work which is underway rather than a finalised document. So I personally, I would also rather note it rather than endorse it, because I think there are still improvements to be made. But obviously, if the committee as a whole wishes to endorse, then that's a matter for the majority of the committee. Can I just ask if there are any other opinions on endorsing versus noting? Councillor Goodjohn?
I'd ask we endorse.
Yep. Okay. I'm taking it that, as myself and Councillor Carroll have said, that we wish to note it. Nobody else is suggested they wish to vote against the motion that's been put forward to endorse. So therefore, I'm assuming this will be endorsed. Happy with that, Karen? Yep.
Yes.
Great.
Yes, Chair, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that's item completed. Item 6 of the agenda is any items with the chair decided are urgent under part 1. I have none. Then under part 2, which is the process under which the public and press may be excluded from the meeting during consideration of items in accordance with section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, we've already decided that we'd like to receive an update regarding our hybrid technology solution under part 2. So if we can take that, is that appropriate as being any items the chair decided are urgent? Karen, can we move to part 2?
You can, as long as I get approval from the committee as well, Chair.
So can the committee please give approval for us to move to part 2 in order to discuss the hybrid technology solutions? Councillor Perks?
Yes.
Yes. And Councillor
Yes.
Thomas has seconded that. So I'm assuming, unless I hear otherwise, that is unanimous support from the committee to move into part 2 to discuss that item. Is that okay, Karen?
That's perfectly fine, Chair. But if you wouldn't mind bearing with us a minute,
Give you 30 seconds
members,
to do that. Yeah.
because we need to stop the recording, and my colleague now, who is live streaming for us, will stop the live stream, and Matt will come online to tell me that it's